Welcome friends. Today we are going to explore the topic vinegar. We are all aware of the term vinegar, but do we know that it is fermentation brought about by microorganisms which produces vinegar? In this episode, we will be discussing what actually is vinegar, what are the different types of vinegar, and the several ingredients which are required for producing vinegar. We will be looking into some processes used in the industries to produce the product, finally winding up with the uses of vinegar. What is vinegar? It is a dilute solution of acetic acid and water. The acetic acid present is normally in a percentage of 4 to 13% depending on what kind of material is used for producing and what is the process. Here we can see that ethanol and mostly other ethanol containing substrates can be used, which is acted upon by a group of bacteria termed as acetic acid bacteria to give us the product vinegar. If we look into the history, we will see that vinegar production and use has been documented as long as 5000 BC. It was the Babylonians who first used and obviously produced vinegar. They used it as a preservative and as a condiment. Later, we have several documents of vinegar being used. Cleopatra used vinegar to show its solubility property. She showed that a pearl dropped in vinegar could be dissolved, and she drank the cup to prove that she could consume a whole wealth just in a drink. Later, we have examples from history showing that Hippocrates, as long back as 460 BC to 370 BC, during his time, he showed that vinegar had several medicinal properties as well, which he documented, and this is available as manuscripts. Hannibal is also known to use vinegar while he was trying to cross the Alps. It was so mighty while crossing the Alps with a huge army of approximately 35 elephants, the boulders were cracked down by using vinegar. In the recent time, Chinese people by name Heta actually tried to make vinegar in China. This was first documented, and we have reports of the production process during this time. Heta actually got the idea from his father that wine could be made, and if wine was left to sour, it tasted very sweet and sourish, giving a different taste, which could be used as a condiment. Now we are moving on to see what kind of microorganisms are required for producing vinegar. Typically, the bacteria are called as Acetobacters or acetic acid bacteria. We have the first genus Acetobacter aceti. These are gram-negative aerobic rods requiring high amount of oxygen for their growth and activity. Now, discussing briefly about these bacteria, we need to mention that Acetobacters are of two types. Some genus are there which are over-oxidizers and some are not so. Over-oxidizer means that they can convert the acetic acid produced into carbon dioxide and water. This is not required in vinegar production. We would like to stop with acetic acid only, and that is why we are not actually choosing the over-oxidizers. Actually, the starter culture used for vinegar production in many processes is known as Mother of Vinegar. It is very interesting to note that when vinegar is produced, there is a surface slime produced by the organism, and you can see the typical growth, the surface slime growth here, which looks just like this if kept on a plate. It doesn't look very good, but this is the colony of Acetobacter organism which are found on any vinegar producing unit. They generally like oxygen, and so much so they grow on the surface where more oxygen is present. This is known as Mother of Vinegar. Acetobacters are generally transmitted by two very important vectors. These are the fruit flies, most often sitting on the vinegars which are left open, and the vinegar eels, which are nematodes which are produced in the vinegar bottles or jars or cans, whichever are left open. These two are the means of transmission of Acetobacter in the environment. Normally, you will find Acetobacter in any wine producing unit. Very interesting to note, because wine or wine containing material are the substrates for production of vinegar. Looking into the biosynthesis, we should know what exactly are the role played by the Acetobacters to give us vinegar or acetic acid. Now, if we use ethanol, it is first converted into acetaldehyde. Then there is a hydration step, meaning water is required or water is added, and we have the production of acetaldehyde hydrate, which later gets oxidized to acetic acid. The whole process of conversion of ethanol to acetic acid happens by actually two oxidation steps. The first is the oxidation from ethanol to acetaldehyde, and the second oxidation is conversion of acetaldehydrate to acetic acid. In between, there is a hydration step. So finally, the product that is obtained, acetic acid, is giving rise to what we know as vinegar, which is nothing but a dilute solution of acetic acid and water. In a broader sense, we can say that if you take fruit or any grain that will contain starch, this starch will be converted to sugars, and these sugars will be fermented to alcohol. Now, alcohol or ethanol is the material which we require for production of vinegar or acetic acid. So, in nature, these fruits or grains, the conversion to starch, sugars and all these are brought about by other processes. The final stage of alcohol being converted to vinegar is what we are discussing here, which are actually using the Acetobacter organisms. Now, we can say that wine is to grapes what vinegar is to wine, because grapes are the substrates used for production of wine. Once you have the wine prepared, you can use it for producing vinegar. Moving into types of vinegar, there are several types. The common ones are the apple cider vinegar, balsamic vinegar, white vinegar, or even black vinegar, but there are others which are named after the substrate that you use for producing it. For example, we are aware of coconut vinegar, kiwi vinegar, and there are so many to name. And here I would like to mention that a very common label by the term synthetic vinegar comes to our mind when we use vinegar. Now, this synthetic vinegar is not produced by fermentation of any microorganisms. It is a purely chemical reaction, and you have the vinegar which is chemically produced goes by the name of synthetic vinegar and not fermented vinegar. We are discussing here fermented vinegars, and so I have listed down some of the fermented vinegars. The first one is the apple cider vinegar. This is typically produced from apple cider. What do you mean by apple cider? Cider is nothing but actually wine produced from apples. So wine, that is ethanol containing beverage produced from apples, is used as a substrate, and the vinegar that is produced from it is called as apple cider vinegar. Mostly apple cider vinegars are lighter in appearance, have a golden brownish appearance. Next comes the balsamic vinegar, which is very much dark in color. Although the name is balsamic, there is no balsam fruit used for producing this. Instead, we have the use of grapes. The black colored grapes goes for production of the balsamic vinegar, and it is a common variety used for several salad dressings and many cooking recipes. Next in line, we have beer vinegar. Obviously understandable that the ethanol content is from beer. Beer is an ethanolic beverage drink, and when beer is used to oxidize it to acetic acid, the vinegar that is produced is called as beer vinegar. It is very common in various parts of the world. And next in line is distilled white vinegar, goes by the name commonly white vinegar. Very often in use. We generally use this in many of our food preparations, bakings and many other items, mainly related to food. It is definitely whitish in appearance, white color, and has a very acidic taste. Other types of vinegars include East Asian black vinegar, very common in parts like China and Japan. The Japan variety is mostly a lighter colored variety, while in the China we find a darker variety. It's very dark in color and most often used for many Chinese preparations. In Japan it is often used for preparation of sushi oki. Then coming to the fruit vinegar, this is very interesting to note. Now, if we can produce some ethanol containing beverage from a fruit, it can be various types, raspberry or very other material, like any fruit can be used. And the wine produced which contains ethanol, if that is used to give us vinegar, it is fruit vinegar. It often contains the taste of the fruit with which it is made. Malt vinegar is very similar to beer vinegar. Malt or malted barley is used. Basically, barley is soaked for some time and then allowed to germinate, which releases enzymes giving amylases, proteases and such. These react on the starch and produce maltose. This maltose is fermented by yeasts to give ethanol. This ethanol now is converted to vinegar known as malt vinegar. It has a very mellow and subtle taste. Then followed by rice vinegar and wine vinegar. Rice vinegar is obviously produced from rice and very common in again the Eastern Asian countries. Wine vinegar is cherished all over the world, and as we know that wine is a very superior and premium product, so vinegar produced from wine is also a premium product, and it can be very much expensive, while because it is aged for a long time, you can also enjoy champagne vinegar, which is a very refreshing drink. So this is the types of vinegar which we have just seen, and we are about to see some methods which will be taking us into how exactly this vinegar is produced. To date, we have several processes, and to name a few, we have first the Orlean process, the second known as the quick vinegar method or trickling generator process, the third is a submerged process, and finally the common process which is applied by many household vinegar producing unit is the natural spontaneous fermentation. We will be looking into each of these in brief details. Now, as we have seen the first, second and third, fourth, it means that the first one was used in the earlier days and followed by the next ones. The submerged process is the best and the most advanced types, and we will see what happens here. The first, the oldest one, known as the Orleans process. Now here you can as well see that we have the barrels, wooden barrels used for producing vinegar. Now the capacity was approximately around 200 liters each barrel, and the starter culture used were 65 to 70 liters high grade vinegar. Now you will be asking why we are using vinegar as a starter culture here. It's very interesting to note that the earlier produced vinegar do contain the Acetobacters required for the production of fresh vinegar. So this acts as the starter culture. Most often it has the mother vinegar. The substrate is actually wine, which we have been discussing, that most of the substrates that we use are either directly wine or some variety of ethanol containing drink. Here we use generally wine. And the total time taken to produce proper type vinegar, which contains approximately 10 to 12% acetic acid, is 4 weeks. So we see it's a very slow process. This has been termed severally as slow process. Later, after the production, the vinegar goes for aging as well. Now, exactly what happens? Initially, the barrels are loaded with the starter culture and the substrate. The substrate is very less compared to the starter culture. So once after a week, the starter culture converts the ethanol, which is approximately 15 liters wine here, into acetic acid. We incorporate fresh wine. That is, freshly newer substrate is fed into the barrels. The disadvantage that was seen in this case was during addition, the bacteria which tend to float on the surface were disturbed. So the solution was to insert a glass rod deep down into the barrel through which the wine was pumped in without disturbing the bacteria which were fermenting the process. Here we can see a typical aging area wherein the balsamic vinegar is being aged after the slow process. The major disadvantage of slow process is it takes a huge time. We have just seen 4 weeks. To get rid of this, the second process was the quick vinegar method or a trickling generator process. We have an apparatus here, as you can see, again made of wood. It is very interesting to note why we are using wood for producing vinegar. Because vinegar is acetic acid, and acid would react with the other container material but would not react with wood. That is why wood is most preferred material for making up the bioreactor or fermenter where the vinegar is getting produced. Now, if we briefly discuss this, we have a furnace-like structure and we have an inlet through which air is pumped in and an outlet through which air would be moving out, because air or aeration is very important for the Acetobacter growth, and we have seen the biosynthesis is an oxidation process, so organisms would be requiring high amount of oxygen. The bioreactor is never filled completely because again that would lead to anaerobic condition, meaning less deficiency of oxygen. Now, after we finish or pack the material with beech wood savings, the ethanol containing solution is trickled down from a plane. Now, once the solution trickles down and vinegar is produced, it gets stored in the lower part. The temperature in this whole system is maintained at approximately 35 degrees centigrade in the lower region, mostly 29 in the upper part. And after a day or so, the vinegar that is produced is dilute, which is pumped back to the top again. That trickles down and further allows for repeated cycles of trickling down and production of vinegar. When this percentage is approximately 12, then this pump is opened and vinegar can be collected. So this is a quick process and requires only 3 days compared to the slow process which we saw earlier. The third method is the best one as we have seen till today. It has lot of control apparatuses and it is a typical bioreactor, as you can see, with all automated parts. It can be also computer assisted and more personnel are never required here. It is made up of stainless steel and there are arrangements for typical aerators, heat exchangers and foam breakers. Because as there is aeration, foam may be generated on top. The foam needs to be broken down because foam can carry away organisms along with it. In this whole system, there are all these apparatuses housed inside, and we incorporate the substrate with a rate of approximately 7 to 10 gram of acetic acid per 100 ml, also containing 5% ethanol. So the starting material is acetic acid plus ethanol. Why? Because the Acetobacters require an acidic pH, and that is why acetic acid is incorporated to lower down the pH and to see that the Acetobacters have a common environment for growth. And wine or ethanol is most often the substrate which the organism will be converting. So till date, this is the best method, or the submerged process gives the total use of vinegar producing unit, and the latest results shows that it is very fast and rapid and even faster than the quick process, giving us results in a day. Now we can operate this in a semi-continuous fashion because as we start removing vinegar, we can incorporate newer substrate which will give us more of vinegar. So kind of a continuous process can be maintained, and highly automated gives the best results. Fringes company is the one to develop this, and sometimes it goes by the name of Fringes as well. Lastly, we will be seeing the fourth one, which is a natural and a spontaneous fermentation, where we basically don't have to do anything, simply allow ethanolic fermentation and then leave it for souring, which is nothing but vinegar. This was the method which was used in the earlier days, the days when we were discussing about the Babylonians and Cleopatra time, and this could give us good result. Although if we want bottled packages of vinegar, we will never follow this method because every batch will not have the same amount of vinegar and same taste. So we will refer back to the earlier methods of submerged or quick method. of the generator process to give us a labeled proper industrial product. After this, we will be moving on to the uses of vinegar, and it is very interesting to note that not only in food, we have seen vinegar being used for a lot of other purposes. In food, it is used severally, but mainly for pickling process, for producing pickled substances, and as salad dressings. In medicines, there are so many to name, but I have listed down some of the uses here. Earlier, it was used to treat skin rash and ear infection during the time of Hippocrates. Later, it was used to treat some jellyfish stings. It has been often used for reducing swelling, inflammation, ache, and other simple minor ailments. It sometimes has been shown to relieve sunburn. Typically, cider vinegar is often used to relieve the effects of sunburn. And not to mention, it is often used as a household cleaner. White vinegar, just diluted, can be used to clean several of our normal household appliances and many places wherein we have dark coloration due to even iron and many other purposes. And not to mention, we also use vinegar as a herbicide, meaning killing the weeds or herbs or unwanted plants which are not required. So this was some of the uses that we have seen of vinegar. There are many others, and documents have been seen even from the history. Basically now vinegar is used in most of our Chinese preparations and the normal food items that we use outside. At home also we are most often using and seeing the greatness of this particular simple liquid which is produced by a simple microbe, and we are happily enjoying it.